Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to the dungeon. This is Dragon Durant. I am the creator of DungeonCORE20, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the new update. We're going to be pushing into, I guess, what we would call Alpha 2 of our development of the system. And what I'd like to do here in this video is talk about the new companion app. So we're not going to waste too much time. We're going to get down right into it. So let's go ahead and drop down here. We're going to go ahead and share the companion app, and you'll find links to this in the description below. Go check it out, join our Discord, and tell us what you think as we continue to work on the system. So let me see here. Let's actually change the title. All right. So we're going to go through what the companion app is. We're going to go through each section since we have moved our rules and the other goodies when it comes to character features and inventory, equipment, items, and so on and so forth. So we'll be getting into that later, but we're going to start off with how we've migrated, moved, redesigned the system from reading about the rules, mechanics, and creating characters through Discord, and instead put together a nice little companion app that can be viewed from a browser. And currently, during alpha, if you download the AppSheet application on Android and Apple, you can also open up the companion app and view it from there. So excited to share what has changed and how we've cleaned things up as we move into this next phase of building the system and what we're going to be doing in the near future. So hang tight and we're going to jump into it. I'm going to go ahead and hide myself so that we don't, I'm not blocking anything as we go through things, but I'm here. Cool. So this is the DungeonCORE20 companion app. This is being viewed through my browser. So that's the experience that we're going to go through here. If you're looking at it from mobile, then you'll really only see one section at a time, but you can swipe left and right within each of these tabs here. So rather than, again, originally we had set it up with the plans of using Discord to deliver rules, mechanics, features, and so on. But now we have an app here that will contain our rules. We have a section for players on how to build their characters and some of the basic information that they'll need to know to play. We have a section for features, which is going to contain all of the various character features, racial features, and so on that can be used to build your character. We have inventory, which is just going to have a very simple basic list of what is used in the system and kind of the framework as we're in alpha of how we're going to design inventory. And we have a section for terms. Now, terms are just terminology. So it's definitions, descriptions of some of the terms that we find throughout the rules, some of the attributes, better descriptions, right? The rules are going to be kept to be very simple to kind of go through and really just teach you the basics. Terms will have the full description that might be spread out across different sections of the rules depending on what we're looking at. So we'll get through each section throughout this video, but we're going to start off with rules. So in the rules page, right, I've tried to keep it as minimal as possible to make sure that players and those running games, who are game masters, we're going to be calling dungeon managers, they can go through and see each section, which will contain just a very simple, right, scrollable list of, well, what is in each section. So starting with welcome to the dungeon. This is going to be our about and community rules. So DungeonCORE20 is a TTRPG, tabletop role-playing game system, which we are going to try to focus more on the collaborative storytelling that we get through the tabletop experience. No matter what system you play, right, there's some element of storytelling, whether it's from those running the game to players who are really getting, into their characters, right, and the dynamic between the members at the table. So we want to encourage that in this environment. We're also going to be looking at a section, or not section, a way of creating characters that gives more power to the player in order to say, hey, I want to create some large hulking beast, right? Most systems, you're pretty limited based on a predefined list of what different racial types are and what they gain. But we'll be getting into how our character creation hopefully differs from a lot of systems that are out there. And then also the app is going to be used as a primary means to find the frameworks of what is hopefully going to be used for a variety of systems. So, and not just systems, but themes, world building, and so on and so forth. I find in a lot of systems that there is a predefined kind of world setting, which is, there's good things about having that lore kind of baked in to the system to maybe build some more intrigue. But DungeonCore20 is meant to be a framework, right? So we're creating this base system for, hey, if I want to create fantasy, this is a rule set that I can use. If I want to create a sci-fi adventure, this is a rule set that we can incorporate. And I find in a lot of other systems, that's a little bit more difficult, right? It puts a lot of weight on the individual running the game. Maybe there's some resources that you have to find, like homebrew, that really allows you to perform that. So DungeonCore is a way, hopefully, where we have the basics down, the framework of how to run a game, and through this system, we can tell various stories in a variety of settings. So yeah, tell us what you think. So in the companion app, right, we've moved from Discord. Rules are now going to be served through this app, and I think it has come together quite well. We can easily kind of go through different sections, and well, we're going to be walking through that here soon. So before diving into the rules, we do have a section where we ask that everyone reviews our community rules. This is just guidelines for the hobby in hopefully 4 easy steps, but we'll paraphrase. So the first one is, big part of the system is to explore your imagination, right? Let your creativity go a little wild. So whether you're creating a character, whether you're building a world, try to stretch the bounds, you know? Don't let yourself be limited by what you wish you could do. Like, go ahead and actually, let's see if we can try to make it happen. Rule 2 is going to be to build collaborative stories, right? The tabletop environment, the hobby, the community, I think is pretty big at the core when it comes to collaboration. Most of the best games that I've ever been a part of is where the players were working together, not just through the game, but also at the table, right? And working even better if they're working with, say, the game master to enrich what they are doing at the table. So I'm hoping that this system will keep that at the core and be a key pillar for how we want to build this community and this hobby using our system. The third rule is specific to dungeon managers. So again, dungeon managers are the game masters of our system. They are the ones that are running the game, oftentimes recruiting players, if anything, and really there's a lot of weight on them to have a successful experience at the table, right? So we want to just highlight the importance of that, the duty I think that they have to the hobby. All right, it's not just getting people together to tell your world that you want to create, but also building a positive experience for the players at the table who are joining you in that collaborative experience. So yeah, respect is going to be our final rule here, right? I think this is kind of a given within any community, whether it's sports and their sportsmanship or just fair play, right? Making sure that we're being respectful, not just to one another, but also the hobby as a whole. So I want to make sure that our community keeps that in mind and respects those boundaries. And, you know, if things happen, which they often do, there is a constructive way to solve them. And we want to make sure to encourage that, right? Whether it be, hey, something came up during a game, let's hold off, finish our game, enjoy it, and maybe talk about it after and come to a agreed solution at the end that everyone can be a part of and agree with. And I think that builds a better knit of friendship at the table in the long term. And if it turns out, you know, a table maybe isn't right for you, that happens. That's part of the hobby. So we want to make sure that we understand that. But at the end of the day, the goal is to have a good experience and make sure that we're creating these enjoyable times together. So those are our 4 rules that we want to just make sure everyone understands going into this. And let's move on to sessions of play. So what are sessions of play? This is something that I don't see a lot of systems really define too well, but we want to make sure that, hey, if you're enjoying our system, right, it's not just a way to plug and play, which you could, but what am I getting into, right, as a player, as someone who's maybe looking to run a game? What's the expectation? What's the most basic expectation for a game? Because at the end of the day, as much as it is a hobby and as much as it can be open-ended, there's systems, we might refer to that as what's the word? One shot, right? So it'd be very much like that. So a scenario, right? Players should have very specific goals and certain objectives that they're looking to accomplish that then will determine, hey, at the end of the evening, did we do well? Did we fail? What comes next? That's the goal of a scenario. The next one, adventure. So adventure is going to be, I think, the most typical type of play. Maybe it's something that is done over a weekend. Maybe it's done over, once a week, over a month, but it is a collection of scenarios that are played out across a certain journey, a certain experience, a certain plot that is able to be completed or at least resolved, right, with some closure at the end of, again, maybe 2, maybe 4, maybe 6 sessions. It's up to really the ones running the game to decide, but the goal is to have a definite end to what our plans are here, right? Hey, your goal is going to be to go and explore this grand labyrinth, and maybe that's not something you can do in a single evening, right? As opposed to, routing some bandits and solving a problem for a small village, right? That might be a part of an adventure, but the adventure might then expand to, okay, we've defeated the bandits, the town is saved, but there's, a larger syndicate that's backing them, and now we have to go to a new town. And anyways, the point is, we want to create a limited time frame, right? A shorter time frame compared to the next play session type. That is something players can jump into, experience, and say that, hey, I played the game, right? Not that I started the game but never finished. So that is an adventure. Campaigns are going to be, I think, what most TTRPG hobbyists are familiar with, which is just ongoing games, right? A dungeon manager wants to run an ongoing campaign to build out their world. Maybe there's a certain source of inspiration that they want to parallel with, a certain space adventure or certain high fantasy adventure, whatever it may be. But this is something that might span multiple weeks, multiple months, multiple years potentially, and even, some cases. So a campaign is just more of an open-ended, the players know that, hey, this is an ongoing thing, and the dungeon manager kind of builds the plot around what they're going to experience, right, over the course of a longer span of time, a more open-ended span of time. I hope that campaigns do find closure. I personally have run into many campaigns where it just kind of slows down and ends off on mid-stride. In some rare cases, maybe we'll try to wrap up the campaign in a one grand final fight or something, but campaigns, ideally, the players should just know what they're getting into, and hopefully you guys will find a fun adventure to go across in the span of however long it might take. So those are the 3 types of sessions that we expect to see with using DungeonCore20, and I think that encapsulates most of my experiences, at least. So let me know what you think and if we missed anything. Next up, we're going to take a look at progression of play. So progression of play is specific to levels. So we are using a level system. Characters, non-player characters will have levels, which really kind of just gives a general, grading for how strong characters can be, how difficult certain encounters that they might bump into will be, and so on and so forth. So there's really 3 stages when it comes to levels that we've tiered them out to. The first one is to consider that, hey, progression is built into the system. So levels 1 and 2, a character really doesn't have a whole lot. We expect level 1s and 2s to be more beginners. They're just starting out. They're not veterans who have spent, years on the battlefield and are just joining a campaign, right? Our levels are actually directly tied to where we expect to see the experience of players and their characters throughout their adventures. So level 1 and 2 is really where we would look to see maybe brand new players to start out with, certain, say, campaigns that you really want to go through the level 1 through 20 experience, level 20 being our max. As well as groups that are maybe new. Level 1 and 2 might be a good place to really build some relationships that you won't find at later levels due to maybe the risk that is imposed by being a low level and kind of going through that experience, or just seeing how a character will progress with their abilities using features and how they allocate their stats from, say, level 1 up to 10, up to 20, and so on and so forth. So level 1 and 2, literally it's the tutorial, right? Levels 3 to 10, I would expect this to be probably where most games will take place. Level 3 will probably be a good starting point. Not even probably, it will likely be the standard starting point for most sessions where the players know what they're doing. They don't want to be just nobodies with no skills that are just starting out. They actually want to maybe have a bit more of a rounded out character to their idea of progression and get that kind of jump start going into the adventure, right? So maybe they are starting off as villagers with potential, right? Or maybe they do have some basic combat experience or whatever it might be. So level 3, maybe even level 5 would probably be a good starting point. At this level, this is where, right, with the increase in level ups, these characters will gain increased stats overall compared to lower levels. And with each level is going to come a way to gain more features, which will be used to gain more abilities and characteristics. So we'll get more into what features are in a later section here, but levels 3 to 10, probably where the main game will be played. And then last up, we have levels 11 through 20. So unlike other systems, levels 11 through 20 is likely going to be where characters who really push into the kind of end game, as I would call it, of our system, or maybe non-player characters who are bosses or special foes, or maybe you're in a very difficult area, will only have characters of this level. So levels 11 through 20, the big difference here is going to be that stat growth changes. Not even changes, but it changes. We'll get into stats later. But the main focus at levels 11 and beyond will be for characters to continue to gain features and round out what features they want to increase, what new features they want to gain, how do they want to round out their character and define them in their character build, if anything. So levels 11 and beyond, I do expect there to be maybe a lot of adventures that play with it. For those that go through like the full level 1 through level 20 experience, I expect to see maybe a lot of people get to the 11 and beyond in our system. But also, right, I do feel that level 10 is probably going to be where most players end up at. But we'll see. You guys let me know what your experience is like using the system and how far you guys managed to get. All right, so before we get into too much, the next couple of sections is going to really just highlight the bare bones basics, right? Okay, we have a good idea now of what the heck the system is through the about. We know how games are, what games generally look like, and then we kind of have a basic idea of, okay, this is what my role in a game as a player is going to look like through levels. Next up, we're going to talk about rolling dice and action economy. So starting with rolling dice, this is where we look at challenges, which is a mechanic of DungeonCORE20, and success and failure, right? When I roll dice, what's a success, what's a failure? So we are using your typical set of tabletop dice, which are going to include the D20, D6, D8, D10, D12, and a D20. If you have multiple dice, we are if you have multiple sets of dice, right? We all know people of the hobby do. So if you are playing with physical dice and you want to use multiple to where needed for convenience, you're obviously more than welcome to. The D20 in the system isn't just a die. We've kind of given it a classification as luck of sorts. So though we don't have like an official luck stat, I think the D20 with its 5%, well, I want to try to keep this video as simple as possible, but each side of a D20 has a roughly a 5% chance, right? So that is, we're going to chalk that up to luck when you're performing challenges. And challenges we'll get to in a little bit. The other dice, D4s to D12s, are going to be a range of proficiency, potential, and potency. So these are going to be used for stats. I will explain stats when we get to stats. It's going to be used for features that maybe require a certain stat or die to be rolled. Damage obviously being another one. And then maybe some consumables that are using dice may ask for these as well. So dice are pretty straightforward, right? If it calls for the die, you roll the die. And in our system, there are a couple of mechanics that do call for the max and half of a stat or die. So in those cases, we are using the literal max and half numbers. So a D4 max 4, half 2. For a D20, max 20, half 10, right? Pretty straightforward. So the goal here, one of the goals with the DungeonCORE20 system is to make sure that when you think of, hey, if I ask for half of something, is there some weird formula that I have to go through? The answer, as much as possible, we've tried to keep it as a no, right? Keep it as simple, bare bones, and make it something that is easily learnable, easily teachable, and at least a little bit intuitive in the terms of, hey, what do stats represent, and so on and so forth. So we'll get to those. So challenge rolls in particular, right? So challenge rolls are a pretty core mechanic to the system. Challenge rolls are a D20 accompanied by a stat. So a body, well, I guess we haven't gone to stats yet, but the short answer here is that challenge rolls include 2 dice. And the way success and failure is calculated is when the challenge is greater than difficulty. And this is going to be, again, another one of those mechanics where we want to try to keep it as simple and intuitive possible. So success is greater than, right? There's no figuring out if it equals. Do I have to remember in certain circumstances equal and greater wins, equal and greater loses? I mean, some systems, right, kind of blur those lines. So in DungeonCORE20, greater is always the winner. All right. Natural 20s and natural 1s. So this is something popular in a lot of other systems. We're going to do something similar where if you roll on the D20 a natural 20 or a natural 1, then it's an automatic success and an automatic failure. Simple, done, right? What's going to be different is our advantages and disadvantages. So this is a mechanic, again, also I think popular in many other TTRPGs. We're going to do something similar here with a twist. So if you have advantage and disadvantage, advantage is pretty straightforward, right? You roll twice, take the higher result. Disadvantage, you roll twice, take the lower result. The difference here is that our challenges are what gain advantage and disadvantages. And challenges are made using a D20 and the stat. So performing advantage and disadvantage makes players roll 2 dice twice, right? We'll get into that more once we cover some of the stats, but the idea here is that, okay, you have the D20 representing luck, there's a bit of a randomness to that, but a character's stat dice are going to be included in that roll. So the larger the stat for the character, the higher the likelihood that even with poor quote unquote luck, they can still maybe, you know, gain a benefit from advantage and disadvantage. Let's see here. We just make a little footnote here that certain features and conditions may affect this as well. So we've kind of already covered that. Action economy. So action economy is, in short, the actions, reactions, and movement, which are, I'd say, the three pillars of what characters are going to be doing and how many they can perform during a round. So actions are fairly straightforward in the sense that you have one per round, right? This is the main activity, the main focus, the main thing of effort that a character is performing. And we have a few standard ones here. Again, we'll get into more of this later, but I should probably move getting started higher up thinking about it, but you know what? Let us know what you think if we should. But when it comes to different challenges and different actions, we're gonna be performing challenge rolls. And these rolls are gonna be, again, a D20 plus a stat. Reactions are gonna be a little different from reactions in that characters have multiple reactions they can perform across a round. And the number of reactions that they get are gonna be based on speed. So speed is one of the stats. I am gonna end up moving, getting started higher up. Yeah, learning about stats earlier would be better. But again, one of the big differences, and this hopefully is how we differentiate ourselves from other TTRPGs, is that we are a reaction heavy system, meaning that characters perform an action during their turn, but across a round, there are ways that we can influence what is being done, right? Whether it be to improve our own actions, maybe complement a ally's actions, maybe affect enemies' actions, and so on and so forth. So reactions are going to be a large part of DungeonCORE20 and how combat is performed and how characters behave when adventuring. And the last main activity that characters are going to perform is movement, also referred to for move speed, which is a resource that represents movement. So characters will gain movement based on their speed stat, right? So the higher your speed die, the more speed that you'll have, meaning that you can move quicker, faster, and in some cases, certain features and reactions might cause you to use move speed throughout a round rather than just during your turn. So again, we'll get into more of this in the next section, which is getting started. So getting started, again, now that I've kind of read it out loud, I do think I am going to move it up before you learn about dice and action economy. But in short, we're just reviewing, you know, what do you need to start playing? So first one, dungeon manager, someone needs to run the game. Then we need a group of players who are going to have characters, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And you need a set of dice and a character sheet, right? This could be digital as well, which if you stick around to the end, we're going to be taking a little sneak peek at the Foundry module that we're trying to work on. So those are the main things that you need. Obviously, everyone should bring their imagination to the table, right? This is a system that I think provides a very nice framework for creating a wide variety of different characters and ways to explore the world with your fellow players and members at the table. So for getting started, this is a short section, more or less because we are navigating those reading our rules to take a look at the Players tab now. So at the top of each section, we're going to give you guys a short kind of quick 3 steps of what is gained during each section. But in short, we'd like you guys to take a look at the player section, review the information that we provide there, which is going to include stats, racial types, features, equipment, and backstory, as well as level up for when that's relevant. And this is, again, going to introduce those concepts rather than replicating them in rules and characters, right? We've tried to keep it very linear, very straightforward on how you can learn to play the system. So with that, we are going to go ahead and take a pause before we go to combat and adventuring to look at the Players tab. So the Players tab has stats, races, features, equipment, backstory, level up, as described earlier. And if we look at the stats page, this is going to give you a brief rundown of what is done when creating a character. So if you stick around to the end, we will, when we introduce the Foundry module that we're working on, maybe even go through making a character with you all. But in the character creation section, we're going to be starting with stats as a D6, right? So we're not going to be using numbers to represent stats. We're going to use dice to represent stats. Then we're going to choose 3 improvements, which I'm sure the rules will cover. And then we're going to determine HP, MP, and move speed, which again, I'm sure the rules will cover. Okay, and then stats may be finalized at any point in time during character creation. So meaning, hey, you don't need to commit at this stage. You could always, make some adjustments as you learn more. Stats are primarily comprised of a character level and represented by stats are represented by dice, right? And this is just, again, more information on if characters have higher stats generally, right? What does that represent? So the stats themselves, we have 6 stats that we're going to talk about. We have vitality, which is going to be a character's health points, so their health pool, their vitality dice, which is going to be covered later. We have HP and MP recovery during rest. Okay, so there's some kind of recovery with vitality. And then we have death timer duration, which is another key aspect of when we get to combat. So body is used for physical strength and fortitude. Really, body represents kind of physical prowess is what we're going for. It's going to be melee damage and guard, okay? Conditions affecting the body. All right, so hopefully, again, body represents those elements, or not elements, those aspects. Mind is going to be kind of the parallel to body, where body is physical, mind is more focused on mental. So we have mental intelligence and insight, sensory and social perception, and conditions that affect mind. So our goal here with mind is to be more of a processing of information, right? Memory, being able to observe, being able to use your senses, being able to process that information, and be able to use your insight and maybe even wisdom to make decisions or perform challenges that are based on those types of aspects. Skill is going to have a focus on physical and social finesse, social deceit and persuasion, and melee and ranged accuracy. So the goal with skill is where body is physical, mind is mental. Skill is more the ability to, well, I guess finesse is really the word that encapsulates what we're going for here, but have finesse in performing those physical, mental, social type activities. So generally, skill is going to be pretty widely used, I would say, because it also encapsulates melee ranged accuracy. So it's going to be heavily used during combat. Arcane is a stat that when we get to what arcane represents in more detail, we'll talk about more. But in short, arcane is going to represent mana points. So that must be something equivalent to health points, right? Mana points for MP and resist. We have arcane accuracy and damage, and then unknown arcana. So arcana, again, is something that ties very closely to quote unquote the arcane, which we'll get into a bit later. Speed encapsulates agility, stealth, and dodge, and also defines the move speeds per round and reactions per round, which we already got a sense of through action economy. As far as level up, that's going to be for stats beyond level 1, so we'll cover that later. Now, stats at level 1, this is really where character creation is probably going to get started, right? So characters all start with a D6 in every stat. So again, body, mind, skill, arcane, speed. Did I say vitality? Anyways, the 6 stats are going to all have a D6. And we're going to be able to improve or increase the size of any combination of stats 3 times. The wording here, I do want to change because it is a little tricky, it seems. I struggle to find the right words to describe this, but in short, we need to improve dice 3 times, right? It could be any combination. It can be the same die, different die, your call as a player. So do I want to max out and be really good at one particular stat, or do I want to have a bit more of a balance as a starting level 1 character is the idea. So instead of a D6 in every stat, we could get a D6 and 3 and a D8 in the other 3, right? Those are going to be the 3 improvements. Or we can go a D6 and 4, improve 1, improve 2, or just put them all into a single stat and make one a D12. So you have a little bit of flexibility when it comes to stat distribution. The main focus of how characters will differ will come when we get to the features section. Health points at level 1. So very simply, you have your max vitality, max body. So we touched on this briefly when we were looking at dice and rolling dice, but this means the max stat size of the dice that represent those stats. So if I say had a D12 and a D6, right, for vitality and body, my initial max HP at level 1 will be a 18. Whereas if I say had a, let's say a D6 vitality and a D8 body, then this would be 14. So we get a little bit of a boost by combining or adding the body stat here. But in short, health points is, well, the health of a character, right? If you play video games, if you play tabletop, you know what health points represent. If you take damage and get reduced to 0 health, then you might die. So let's try to keep vitality high, right? All right. Mana points. So mana points are a resource specifically used for using Arcana, using arcane features. So it's a resource to use spells, use magic, use powers, whatever it may be, but that's what mana point is going to represent. Mana point could, I wondered about naming it something a bit more unique, but I think through just the vast majority of video games and tabletop that I think players will understand what mana is supposed to represent, right? But realistically, it could be technical points, it could be I don't know, arcane points. You can name it whatever you want, but mana points is what we're going to go with for the time being. Move speed per round. So move speed, again, we touched on this when it came to action economy and movement, but a character's speed, their max speed, determines how much movement that the character will have. So a D12 is going to give you 12 points of movement, which sounds pretty ridiculous, but you guys will see it's not that bad. So lots of movement. Armor score is a stat that you would track on a character that is gained from armor and features. Armor score we're going to talk about more when we get to equipment, as well as a little bit in combat later. And then last up, we have vitality dice. So vitality dice was talked about under vitality, and what it represents is based on your character level. So if at level 1, you're going to have 1 vitality dice. At level 10, you're going to have 10. At level 20, you're going to have 20. But vitality dice it's a bit of a combination of a resource and what do I want to call it? Like a reserve of health in a way. Vitality dice will be talked about more when we get to combat, since it is very heavily tied to character death. But some features might use it. There might be some effects, conditions that will call upon it. But yes, vitality dice, you simply have a number equal to your level. So stats are pretty simple, right? The main thing, again, with stats, if we come back up to the top, is to determine what your starting stats are going to be. So it's stat allocation and then your initial stats, which are all based off of your stat choices. So very, very simple creation for character stats. Races, let's move on to races. So races, again, we're going to try to keep this very simple, very straightforward. Races within DungeonCORE20, this section, we're going to be choosing a racial type. We're going to consider racial size, and then we're going to choose an innate affinity. So that we'll get to this in a little bit. Now, character race is going to be different compared to a lot of other systems where races themselves have defined bonuses. The difference here is that races and racial types are going to instead provide racial points and character points, which are going to be used to acquire features. And the importance with race is going to lean more towards the number of racial points that you get to create a unique race, or a race that really has the features that you want, right? One of the issues that I have in a lot of other systems, it's like, hey, I want to create a particular character, a particular race. Let's say I want to create, gosh, I don't have a good example off the top of my head, but I wanted to create, say, a elemental character, right? In a lot of systems, you wouldn't really be able to do that. You would need to have maybe an expansion that introduces a monster race. Maybe you need an expansion that introduces some kind of an elemental race, but I would never really have the ability to say, without some really heavy changes or reflavoring, to say I want to create an elemental and play as an elemental that isn't just a character that has elemental properties, but literally I want to be like a fire spirit or something, right? It'd be a little difficult to pull that off in a lot of systems, I find. So we have 6 main races that we'll talk about and what each of those are going to gain. And really, again, the race themselves are going to be more for flavor purposes, but the benefits are going to be the points that they gain. So let's start off. So the first one we have are, I guess we'll talk about these 3 together. So we have humans, dwarves, and elves. Now, these are pretty typical fantasy kind of trope races. What I want to find is, hey, if I want to play fantasy, if I want to play sci-fi, could I incorporate this into those worlds, right? Some sessions, some games, maybe you're going to say, hey, players, I don't want you to create dwarves or elves, but monsters and humans are fine. You know, that's up to the one running the game. But I find that in a fantasy setting, human, dwarf, elf, it's kind of the trifecta of races, right? When it comes to the good guys. But also when I look at, a lot of sci-fi tropes, we sometimes will find, at least with my interests, we might find space humans, space dwarves, space elves, right? Or some flavor of it. For example, I'm not even going to get into examples here yet. But yeah, so those are the 3 kind of trifecta that we're going to keep. Humans will have the fewest number of racial points. They only get 2. But though they will have more character points when they're being created. Whereas dwarves will have 3 racial points and 5 character points. Elves will have 4 racial and 4 character. So elves are pretty balanced. But this is the idea here, right? Each racial type is going to have a different number of starting racial and character points at level 1. This becomes maybe a bit more minimal the higher level the characters get and the more character points they get throughout their levels. But the importance here is that, hey, if I want to have a very unique kind of race, you could go with, your typical human and give them a couple bonuses, but then you could also go down and create a beast or a monster, which are going to have 5 racial points, 3 character points for a beast, and 6 and 2 character points for monsters, right? So beasts and monsters, for example, are going to be a lot more varied based on what characters and what players decide to do with their characters when it comes to how strong they want their race to be a part of, I suppose, their character, right? Pretty straightforward. The 6th race that we have is actually just a group called the mixed race. And this is really just more of a formula that, hey, you're going to get 4 and 4 when it comes to racial and character points, but you can kind of combine and gain access to what other races may have, right? Most restrictions when it comes to features that cost racial points are going to be limited to beasts and monsters, but there are a couple that elves have access to, dwarves have access to, and I believe there's one that is a bit more unique to humans. So keep that in mind when you're creating characters. I suppose I should also kind of talk a little bit about beasts and monsters, because those are a bit more generic terms, right? So beasts within the DungeonCORE20 system are characters that have, well, beast-like characteristics, right? Whether that be ears, limbs, tails, maybe they're some kind of a hybrid. well, I guess I'm getting into the mixed race territory here, but beasts are really animals, right? Is the way I'm looking at it, whereas monsters are monsters and anything else. So monsters are a bit more of a catch-all term, as we've described, that don't fit into the human, dwarf, elf, or beast categories. So monsters could just be otherworldly creatures. They could be grotesque beings, abominations. They could be undead. I guess undead would be more of a mixed race based on our usage here. But monsters could also include things like maybe robots. I don't know. They're basically, if it doesn't fit in any other category, they're gonna have more racial points than character points to help define what the monster is, right? That's kind of the idea here. Now, mixed race being a race that lets you combine a couple of the others, right? This is really up to the imagination of the player and what the dungeon manager is going to allow. So we've given some examples. If you'd like to see other examples, leave a comment. Maybe we'll add it. Who knows? But we don't want to have a too large of a list, right? But in short, something like a half-elf, right? Pretty simple. In this case, it's a human and an elf, right? Halfling. This is something that we see in Lord of the Rings and other systems. This might be, depending on your definition or the definition of, say, the world that the adventure is being played out in, this would probably be like a human and a dwarf, or not a human and a dwarf, a human and an elf, or a dwarf and an elf, right? Or maybe even human and dwarf. So maybe I should say human or dwarf or elf. But in short, right, depending on how are we going to define the characteristics of a halfling, it's up to you. I mean, heck, you might even just say a halfling is a small human, right? So it might not even be a mixed race based on how you want to create the character. So it's just a simple way of deciding how many, again, racial points and character points you want to start off with based on your race selection. The others here, I'm not going to read off every single one, but I've had a few comments that, hey, cat girl, human beast. That was a funny one to have in there. Character size. So character size, we're just highlighting here because there are features that are representing character size. All characters start at medium. So all tokens within the game are going to be using a medium-sized token. But if a character wants to be a small size or large size or even a huge size character, which increases their token size as well, we've given just a simple maximum height in order to help gauge, what's appropriate within each section here, or within each racial size, character size. So we'll get into more about sizes when we get into features, but this is something, again, as the steps at the top were explaining, something to consider. Innate affinity. Innate affinity is a mechanic for DungeonCore20 where characters have an affinity for the arcane. Now, how that manifests into your story is really up to how you leverage it. Some characters may rarely, if ever, use them, whereas others may be using them all the time, right? It's really up to the player and the character to decide. But all characters, at minimum, will have one innate affinity, something that they resonate with, right? And we have 6 main affinities within our game, which represent different types of arcana. So force is going to be the first, which is represented in the themes of earth, kinetic, and thunder, right? Things with impact, in a sense. We have warm, which actually I've renamed to heat. I guess I missed the section here, so I'll have to update that. But heat is the second affinity, which is represented in things like fire and thermal and plasma. Cold is ice, fluids, and water, which fluid we might change to like flow or something like that, right? We're still fine-tuning some details in alpha here. Spirit is going to be emotion, life, and nature. So if you want to deal emotional damage, this is the one for you. We have light, which is represented in celestial, laser, and lightning, right? So a bit more, I don't know what you would call it, but high power. And then we have dark, which is represented as, or in, acid, necrotic, and shadow. So maybe I should change acid to corrosive. That might be better. We'll see. But anyways, those are the 6 main arcane affinities, and all characters will start with one of those. So very simple, right? If we go back up to the top, you're really just choosing a racial type, which decides the number of starting racial points and character points, and you're choosing an innate affinity, which just may be used later. Next up, we have features. So this is a core aspect of the DungeonCORE20 system. This is how you really define what kind of a character you're creating here. So we have a few steps again. First step, spend your racial points. Okay. Second step, gain 1 free archetype feature. So we'll talk about that. And then third step, spend your character points. Okay. So the first step here, right, is a description of what features are. So these are what grants characters different actions and reactions. There might be different characteristics or benefits that you gain from features, but we have 5 main types. I guess before that, when it comes to spending your racial and character points, each feature costs 1 point per rank. And some features, which we'll get into later, have multiple ranks up to 9. So let's start with racial features. Now, racial features have a max rank of 1. So 1 racial point is 1 racial feature. So a human would have 2, a monster would have 6. And racial features are going to be really kind of characteristics that round out, hey, what is my race? What are the properties of my race? Sorry guys, I gotta step away for just a minute. We're gonna go to the BRB. All right, we are, oh, there we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Quick, brief little emergency came up. All right, so let's get back into the rules here. So once again, right, we talked about racial features, which are for racial characteristics. And then we have archetype features. So archetype features are a unique character feature. So with the exception of racial features, everything else from here on out is a character feature or a type of a character feature. So meaning that each of these are going to cost 1 character point per rank. So archetype features have a max rank of 1 as well. And these are going to provide unique character, I guess, archetype characteristics. So these will be special character features that are going to be unique in the sense that they don't have ranks. They provide maybe 1 or more benefits or ways to be used. And the main difference with archetype features from other features is that you are going to obviously start with your first one for free during character creation, but you can only have a maximum of 3 of them. So this is going to, I think, provide a little bit of a, I don't know, what do you call it? A choice? Yeah, I guess a choice. So you're going to have to make a choice of what are the 3 archetype features that I'm going to want building my character, right? And these are hopefully going to be a way to uniquely kind of differentiate types of characters. Because DungeonCORE20, we are not using classes. We don't have classes. If anything, the collection of features that you choose would be the closest thing to define your class. So if a player wants to give themselves like a class or a style or a name that represents a class, more power to you. Now, character features are their own, and these have 9 ranks. So character features mostly are going to provide, you know, offensive abilities, defensive abilities, ways to augment, you know, how your attacks are performed. So do I want to be more accurate? Do I want to be more powerful? Do I want to be more, let's say, adept at, you know, going stealth or performing attacks in certain ways, right? So character features are a way to really give you the toolkit that you need, the tools needed to use weapons, to perform actions and reactions, and uniquely identify kind of your play style is what character features are here for. And then we have arcane features. So arcane features are a type of character feature also with 9 ranks, but arcane features represent a whole wide range of arcana, whether arcana is magic, powers, technology, whatever it may be based on the setting and what's appropriate for the game. But we have a main difference here in that arcane features are character features, but in order to learn them, you need to have an arcane archetype. So under the archetypes that you can choose from, there are going to be a handful of them which are arcane, which is what gives you access to acquire arcane features. And we'll take a moment to go through features probably later, maybe when we're like making a character, for example, or we will briefly review them. So yeah, hold off for that. We'll cover them later. Now, the last one is profession features. So profession features is something that we rounded out in Alpha 1 and we will need to improve on in Alpha 2, but I guess what's the word I'm looking for? The foundation for building out kind of what we want to do with professions and crafting are going to be done through profession features. Profession features are, again, a type of character feature. These also have a max rank of 9, but profession features differ from character and arcane features in that these are used more for what we call downtime activities, and generally every profession feature has a means of acquiring goods. So making money or obtaining items through crafting, right? Profession features are going to be focused on that. And similarly to archetype features, we are putting a restriction. There are features that maybe grant more of these, but we are limiting characters to 2 professions. I think some video games do this where it's like, hey, your character really can specialize in 2 things. I think that's a decent number, and we'll talk about this more when we get into features themselves. The last thing that we cover in the features section is something called upkeep. So features in DungeonCORE20 don't have a set duration most of the time. I think there are a couple of exceptions, but the way features persist across rounds or just stay active by character choice is going to be done through upkeep. Meaning, hey, if I say conjure an illusion as an example, right? How does that persist? It's done through upkeep. So upkeep characters can perform a number of these equal to half of their mind stat. So their mind, half of that, right? So for D6, if that's the default, you'll have 3 features that if they allow upkeep, that you can upkeep, right? So this is just something that you can track across turns and rounds and so on and so forth. Okay. Let's see. So next section is equipment. There is a section under rules that is specific to equipment, but the equipment under the players tab is specific for starting equipment, right? Your initial equipment. So we have 3 steps again. Step 1 is to choose a weapon or an arcane catalyst. Step 2 is to gain a weapon or armor. And then step 3 is to gain some starting currency. So it looks like we're going to roll a 46 times 10. And that is my starting currency. So if we roll 4 1s, that's going to be 40 starting currency, whereas if we roll 4 6s, that's going to be 240 starting currency. And then optionally, players can choose to skip a step. So exchange a step above for 1 extra character point. So this would be a way for, say, like a monster character or a beast character. It's like, hey, I don't really need a weapon or armor. I want to get 2 more character points because I'm usually going to be starting with 3 or 2 character points, right? So it's just a little extra way for any character really to gain a couple extra character points during character creation. Attributes. Okay, so we do briefly talk about equipment attributes. So attributes within DungeonCore20 are a way that I hope creates a bit of gear progression. This is something that I don't really see a whole lot of systems capitalize on. Like, I see a lot of systems that will just give you a bunch of weapons and weapon types and effects, but they don't really give you the framework for building your own or giving players a sense of progression without just replacing what they already own, right? So we're going to do this through an attribute system. So equipment primarily are going to have attributes. Attributes are going to grant things like armors and weapons different effects or different ways to be used. So this is something that I think is quite cool, that I'm looking forward to seeing your feedback on. But there are a couple of attributes that have stat conditions, meaning that, hey, if it has this attribute, you need a particular stat in order to use them effectively. Otherwise, you're going to have disadvantage. So heavy is an attribute that requires a D10 body. So your body stat needs to be a D10 or higher. Otherwise, you gain disadvantage. Ranged requires a certain degree of skill to use, whereas a firearm requires even more skill to use, which, yeah, or you get disadvantage, right? Basic equipment attributes. So these are, a lot of these starting equipment will have a basic attribute already assigned to them. We'll get into this when we get to items in the inventory section here. But we've highlighted the initial basics, which is going to be light, which says, hey, instead of using skill to hit, you can use speed to hit. Okay, right? So this is something that we need to get to combat in order to learn more about, which I should add. But we also have versatile, which says, hey, if I use it two-handed, I could increase the damage. So let's say a weapon deals a D6 or a D8. Let's use a D8. So let's say it deals a D8 damage. I could use it two-handed in order to deal D10 is the idea, right? We increase the die of the damage. Throwing is an attribute that lets you add skill to your throwing reach. So DungeonCore20 uses a spaces and a reach system of spaces to hit a target. So adding skill to throwing reach means that I can throw something farther, most likely. Reach simply increases reach by 1. So weapons, say with reach, have increased reach. What a concept. We have shields. Shields are going to grant armor score and the guard reaction, which again, we'll learn more about this probably in combat. And arcane, which says it can be used as an arcane catalyst. So to use arcane features, an arcane catalyst is needed. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, so we have a full list under the terms tab. And then here we have a very quick list of common melee weapons, ranged weapons. I should probably just combine this section now that I look at it. But in short, right, a dagger is a D4, has the light property. Hand axe is a D6, has the light property. Longsword, D8, versatile property. And then something like a great weapon. So this might be like a great sword as a D10 with versatile and heavy. So a quick little list of what kind of equipment are available for starting gear. And then same goes for ranged weapons. Short bow, D6, has the ranged attribute. Longbow, D10 range, so on and so forth. So very simple list, but obviously, right, a full list is going to be available under inventory. Armor. Armor provides characters with armor score to reduce physical damage by a flat amount. So this is something that is very different from a lot of TTRPGs that I've played, which armor was more of a abstract value that was used to represent the combination of armor's effectiveness and I guess avoidability or dodgeability, whatever the word is. So armor score in DungeonCore20 actually does something. When you take damage and you have armor score, that damage gets reduced. So if it's physical damage, like from a weapon, and let's say it deals 6 damage, if I'm wearing heavy armor, that's now 3 damage. It's a flat reduction, and that's that. Armor also provides a dodge reaction, or not dodge, a defend reaction, excuse me. So light armor allows you to dodge. Medium armor, which is primarily made out of leather, will allow dodge and guard, whereas heavy armor only allows guard. So I've been debating if I should add a rule that says, hey, you can still roll any of them just with disadvantage, but I think for now, right, depending on the type of armor you're wearing is going to determine what can you do with it, right? Someone wearing cloth armor, for example, trying to body block an attack isn't going to end well, right? Whereas if you're wearing heavy armor, trying to maneuver out of the way quickly is going to be challenging. So if you want to find that kind of balance point, medium armor might be the way to go. And shields are pretty unique in the system as well, because it's not armor and they're not weapons. They're kind of a hybrid. So shields can be used as weapons, which is something that always upset me in other games where they couldn't be used to make attacks, right? You had to always kind of finesse it to make something like that happen. But shields are essentially weapons in DungeonCore20. And shields also, when used, provide armor score. So if I have heavy armor with a heavy shield, I now have 6 armor score. I could feel like a tank, right? It is really the goal here. But if I want to say, slam a shield into somebody, then I'll have the ability to do that too. So a weapon, brain, please. Shields, again, we'll take a look at when we get to inventory, but they are both weapons and they provide armor score similarly to armor. So going back to our rules at the top, the goal of this section, again, characters will choose the weapon or catalyst. They'll choose the weapon or armor. So I can get, say, 2 weapons and no armor. Maybe if I'm a mage, I can get the arcane catalyst and armor. If I want to be like a good combination, I can get a weapon and armor, right? So again, this is for level 1 characters, which remember in DungeonCore20, these are super kind of novice level characters. These are literally the tutorial levels of the system. So very, very simple, very basic. And I think so far has been a good way to start. Backstory is pretty optional when it comes to creating a character. The goals of, again, our companion app and the rules is really to just be a step-by-step kind of how do you get started, how do you play, what do you do when certain situations arise. And backstory is something that, in my experience at least, is something that heavily relies on the one running the game and the player's motivations to partake in backstory and character growth and development, right? So backstory we're classifying as an optional character creation step, but we do recommend players, at least try to create a simple description of their character, right? So consider your appearance. Yeah, what did I just say? Consider your appearance, consider your motivations, and then obviously as a simple step, share it, because we want to make sure that people understand what kind of character you've created. And if you want to explore kind of more about your history in game, that's something that could be done through role play and so on. But in short, we have 2 main steps here, right? Consider your description. So what's your appearance? What's your mannerisms? When somebody looks at you, whether in game or if they suddenly popped up on the table, right? Like what at a glance would you notice about the character in the way that they look and the way that they behave? One thing to consider, this is going to be a bit more important if you created maybe a beast or a monster type character, is like what kind of features did you choose? How did you allocate your stats? does this affect your appearance as well? So someone with, say, a D12 in body, which is maxed out, maybe they look very strong. One of the, I suppose, aspects of our system that we don't really have a stat for is something like charisma or charm, right? I usually find that these are more driven by player actions rather than just stats. Like the stats are a way to use them, but like a charismatic character that has a player that never speaks isn't really that charismatic in game, right? Because they're not really interacting with NPCs or anything. So I've kind of left charisma out of the system as something that if you want to make your character charismatic, then maybe they are a looker, but they don't speak very much. Or maybe they are a looker and they do speak a lot. Or maybe they're fugly and either or, right? So your character description, I think, is the better place to introduce those types of themes and desires for character development or growth or just description. The next section here are really just considerations, which is your motivations, right? So what is their origin? Where did they come from? What motivates them? What's their personality? What's their history and past like that maybe shape them or motivates them to partake in this journey? And then any relationships, right? Allies, enemies, who do they interact with, how? So very simple ways to just set up a simple backstory, nothing complex, and also not something that is heavily driven by the game, because a lot of systems do have as part of their character creation like a backstory selection, but I almost always find that those are very minimally used, if ever at all. Some characters, some players, some games take more advantage of it than others, but I do find it oftentimes a distraction, if anything. So let me know what you guys think, if you agree with that, disagree with that. But backstory, again, more of a player-driven activity, I would say, than one that needs to be system-driven. So that is why backstory is optional. Last up into the players tab, we have level up. So this is what happens when I gain a level. So immediately gain your max HP and MP increases. So pretty straightforward. Immediately gain any stat increase, which we'll cover in a second, and then spend character points. So new characters start level 1, progress up to 20. Obviously the dungeon manager could say, hey, we're starting at level 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever. But when you gain a level, immediately one of your stats is going to increase, right? So let's say we took the average D6s and D8s, right? I can then at level 2 increase one of those 6s or one of those 8s to an 8 or a 10 respectively, right? So level 2 and beyond, characters increase one stat of their choice upon a new level. At level 11 and beyond, at this point, I think what was the formula here? It was, I think most characters will have 2 stats at a D6 and 4 stats at a D12. I think that was the math by the time they reach level 10. So from level 11 to 20, right, you can't really increase too many more stats. Otherwise, everyone by the end just has a D12 in every stat. There's no variety at all. As much as stats do play a bit more importance at the beginning of the game, and maybe less importance towards level 10, and then at level 20 and beyond, it's more just kind of rounding out what I want. So at level 11 and beyond, you can choose to increase a stat, but you also reduce a different stat. So this is a way that, say you make a character, you level them up, you increase your stats, and you get all the way to level 8 or 9, and you're just like, man, I really wish I had an extra stat or 2 in this other thing that I have started to build towards rather than something I previously allocated, right? So at level 11 and beyond, as we described when we were talking about our levels of progression, right? This is at levels 11 and beyond is where we can start making those kind of fine-tuned adjustments when it comes to stats and how we've decided to allocate them, but also how we round off our features and how our character plays. So level 11 and beyond, stats do become a bit less important, but you do have the option to make those adjustments as you see fit. Health points and mana points are both going to increase at level up. For health, you roll vitality, gain that amount in health. And then in the mana point case, you roll arcane and gain that much NP. So pretty straightforward, but you do gain these immediately, or at least your max immediately. Current HP and MP values you will have to gain through resting or using items. So there are ways to recover the delta, I think is the word. Character points. At each level, characters will gain 6 character points. So this is a way to then gain additional character features. If you have an arcane archetype, you can gain arcane features, you can gain profession features, and you have 6 points to spend, right? You also have the ability to acquire archetype features, right? As long as you have no more than 3. If at level 1 you took the one and you at level 2 gain another, at level 3 you might gain your third one, but after that, after the 3, remember, archetypes are done. Same with professions. Once you pick 2, professions are done. But professions you can level up to rank 9. Character features up to rank 9. Arcane features up to rank 9. So each level you're going to have 6 new points to allocate, whether on improving the ranks of features you've already learned or by gaining features that are new that you want. But that's it. Pretty straightforward. Again, the idea with the players section here is to just create a very quick and short series of steps for players to learn a little bit about the game, the basics of the game, and learn about how to make their character so that they can start playing. All right. So now that we've reviewed the players tab, let's actually jump back to the rules page and go back to combat. So combat is going to be a section that covers what to do when combat occurs. So first of all, we have initiative. Initiative rules are how we're going to define the turn order that occurs across a round. And this is done by rolling a speed challenge, which is a d20 plus your speed stat, right? So now that we have an understanding of stats, we know that if we have, say, a d8 in speed, this will be a d20 plus a d8 would be our roll. And now combat is performed over intervals of 10 seconds of in-game time. So a little bit longer than a lot of the others, but it is again, a reaction heavy system. So we've bumped that up a little bit to showcase that, hey, while you're, say, fighting, you go run around, you perform an attack, and some characters might be performing other actions that will take, span 10 seconds. So I think 10 seconds has been a okay representation of a combat round. A round consists of character turns, right? So based on initiative order, characters will take their turns, and then a character turn goes in order. Pretty straightforward. Turns are where actions and movement are spent, whereas across a round, reactions are spent. So that's one differentiation there. We did add some rules for what happens if a natural 20 or a natural 1 are rolled during initiative. So if you roll initiative and get a natural 20, you get advantage on your first challenge. And if it's a natural 1, disadvantage. Nice little, small little bonus, or bane, I guess is the word, for initiative rolls. But let me know what you think about that. We might change that in the near future or add something to it. Combat vision. So vision is another thing, right? We talked a little bit earlier that duration wasn't something that features had a definition for. It was more something that characters would choose to upkeep. Vision is something that also, as long as visibility conditions aren't limiting vision, we're only really restricting vision to combat. And part of the reason is when you're not in combat and you're just kind of, say, adventuring or traveling or role-playing, the vision that a character has is pretty well defined to, the range that their character could feasibly see. Light sources could be seen from miles away, for example. If you're indoors, there's already a pretty clear restriction to what you can see, and so on and so forth. So in combat, this also affects because features don't really have a defined range, with a few exceptions. Right? What's going to limit a character from attacking, crazy distances away if they're in the midst of combat with a feature that doesn't have a minimum range or a maximum range, for example. So vision is pretty straightforward. Based on your mind stat, it's double the die value. So in combat, if you have a D8, you have 16 spaces of vision, which is pretty generous when it comes to combat and tabletop on a grid. So vision from poor visibility and light conditions. This is in cases where visibility is, say, dim or dark, right? I can't see, or it's literally pitch black. We've reduced the visibility, but also introduced a disadvantage to stats. So if it's dim, if you can't really see very well, your mind becomes your reach. So rather than double, it's just the base value. So effectively half visibility. And then your mind, which is again used for things like observations, is going to be at disadvantage. Which, thinking about it, maybe I'll remove that. Not sure. But then we have dark. Dark would be things like pitch black, darkness. It's you're in a cave with no light. It's a new moon and there's no light. In this case, we've reduced your reach to a 3, so you can still see 3 spaces around your character. We think the idea of not being able to at least sense or have a vibe or have a basic understanding of like what's an arm's length out, and maybe and then maybe a little bit more, but yeah, 3 reach seems like a decent amount. Obviously, the dungeon manager could make adjustments to these as they see fit for their adventures, but this is what we've decided is the kind of standard visibility within the game. Attack actions. Attack actions are pretty straightforward. When you want to perform an attack, you roll a d20 plus skill. So attacks are generally a skill challenge, and certain features might allow you to perform other attack rolls. To hit, pretty straightforward, following the same general rules as what we described in challenges. A success is when the attack challenge is greater than your passive speed. So passive speed is a type of difficulty score. This is something that we'll cover at the very end when we quickly go over the dungeon manager's manual, but passive speed is something all characters or targets would have. If there is no passive speed, the manual will cover a little bit on what alternative difficulty scores a player could use. Defend reaction. So defend reaction is how a character could respond to being attacked. So an enemy attacks you, how do you want to respond? And the success of a defend challenge is based against the attack challenge. So the attack challenge essentially becomes the difficulty score for the defend. Now there's 3 main types. There's guard, dodge, and resist, using body, speed, and arcane respectively. Guard basically says, hey, if I have heavy armor, which has, guard, if I have a shield that provides guard, I can try to brace and defend against the attack, which then allows the character to double their armor score. Really, really giving the game and characters the sense that, hey, I could be the bulwark, right? I could stand in front of a dragon blowing fire at me and try to defend that, right? That's something that you don't really experience in other systems. So hopefully this accomplishes that. Then we have dodge, which is, hey, I've been attacked. I'm pretty quick. I want to try to dodge out of the way and reduce the damage I would receive, or not even reduce, remove the damage I would receive. So light armor and leather armor, right, could let you perform dodge, but equipment that is like heavy armor won't be able to use dodges, because otherwise I think that'd be a little too strong. But also if you're wearing heavy armor, probably you're not going to be able to dodge very well. But dodge, very simply, you roll a speed challenge against the attack. If you win, then you dodge the damage, right? But it is dependent on the roll. Resist is a bit unique in the sense that you perform a defend against arcane damage. So if an attack deals arcane damage, this might be like a arcane feature used against you. And let's say you have fire, or not fire, but well, I guess fire is fine. I mean, heat could be named fire in the campaign or adventure, right? And your innate affinity matches that damage type. And what this will allow you to do is, up to your level, you can spend mana points to reduce that damage. So if I'm level 1, it's going to have a pretty small benefit if I choose to use it. But you have to make a arcane challenge against it anyways. But it's minimal, right? But it may be better than nothing. You never know. But at level, say 20, if you're able to reduce a certain damage type by 20, that's much more significant and something that you might see much more frequently, right? So resist is probably something that we will see more benefit at higher levels, or at least beyond maybe level 3, level 5. But outside of that, it is an option for characters to spend mana points. Damage, how is damage determined? So physical damage is reduced by armor score. Yeah. So yeah, the damage you would receive right after you get hit, and if you say fail a defend reaction, so you're like, dang it, I'm gonna get hit. The target, the enemy, will roll their weapon or feature for damage, and if it's physical, you can reduce it by your armor score. But if it is arcane damage, and if you don't use a defend reaction, armor score does not affect that, right? So keep that in mind. I should probably add a sub note or a little footnote that kind of highlights that. We're getting close to the end of combat here, but we have conditions, which are going to describe just very briefly that conditions exist and they affect maybe body, mind, or some other aspect of your character's state or status. And then conditions are described more under the terms tab. Critically wounded is something, this is a condition that is important to the game because it is the beginning of potentially a character's death. So when a character reaches 0 health points, they're going to gain critically wounded. And if they gain critically wounded, they become prone. So these are conditions. And a death timer, which is a bit of a mechanic / condition within the game. So a death timer, or before I get to death timer, so if you are critically wounded, you can still perform your actions, reactions, and movements normally, and your timer that you'll roll for becomes your health points. So your health points get replaced with the death timer. Part of me wants to rename this to something else, but we'll make that decision another time. But death timer is the duration equal to your vitality, so you roll vitality, and all vitality dice. So you spend all your vitality dice, you roll another vitality die for free, and that becomes your health points. And if you take damage, those health points are reduced, and if you get healing, that duration is increased. And the death timer represents the number of minutes until your character bleeds out, succumbs to some critical wound. In short, they die. So death timer is going to be a bit of a roll your dice mechanic, a push your luck mechanic, right? Like you can go in, you can still fight, you can still keep playing and try to help your allies, but if that reaches 0, you might be a goner. Now, healing will help you stay at that edge a little longer, and if you want to remove it, there are some conditions that must be met. So first of all, you might complete a long rest with your health at half or greater, your health being the death timer duration, and if that is successful, then you might recover. It looks like one of the updates did not get pushed here, but if you also complete a full rest, you'll fully heal, and that will remove the timer as well. But those also have conditions as well. Now, during a rest, we do not decrease the timer as long as 1 or more bandages, which is a type of item in the game, is used. So as long as you're being treated during a rest, you don't have to worry about taking a 1 hour rest and your death timer is at 40, right? Meaning that you have 40 minutes against the 1 hour rest. Am I dead? No. As long as bandages are used, your character will be in a relatively stable condition as you're being cared for, and we're not going to track that timer during the rest duration. But that's it for combat. One of the longer sections, but one hopefully that is still short enough and just highlights again what to do in combat. Adventuring is a relatively short condition. I think we're getting to the point where we're going to start speeding up covering a few of these sections just because of the type of content that is within them. But adventuring is really up to the type of game you're playing, right? The session type. So if you are not really heavily engaged in, going from A to B, and there, you have combat, travel, right? The adventuring phases includes group travel. So this would be like map travel, for example. Maybe within towns we have rest. So we'll cover rest, downtime. So these are downtime activities, and just general role play, things that, players do with one another. So we have a brief section here. We're not going to actually cover this too much tonight, but speed of travel for the group is given in 6 move speed. So if you're traveling on a world map, right, if you're on foot, it's going to cost more move speed. If you're on a mount, a little bit less than if you're in a vehicle, a little less. So it's just a way to help track how travel is performed across greater planes. If it's within combat or within role play, then you could obviously do it through narrative role play rather than using the group movement mechanics that we've added here. So really up to the game on how you decide to handle group movement. Resting is probably a bit more important for you guys, which is, what do I do when I want to spend a bit of a break to recover? So we have 3 types of rest that can be performed. Short rests, which have a duration of 10 minutes, and you can perform up to 6 of them per rest. So meaning we can take 1-hour breaks at a time, but any more than that, and you're not going to gain any additional benefits. Again, it looks like one of our updates didn't get pushed here, but this line is removed, so we're going to ignore that. But the effect of short rest is you spend a vitality dice. So at level 1, not going to really help you too much, but when it comes to a character that's say level 5, level 10, level 20, the ability to take a breather and maybe recover a little bit of health or use features that could be used during downtime to recover mana or whatever it may be, is something that could be performed during the short rest. Long rests are something that takes 4 hours of in-game time. We're going to allow a max of 2 of them per day, so you can long rest twice, and you can spend any available vitality dice to recover health or mana, right? Because vitality dice are spent to recover either health or mana. It's your call as a player. And if the long rest is successful, meaning if the 4 hours was successful, you're going to recover half your vitality. So this is where our kind of half rules come into play. If you are level 10, obviously that means 5, but if you're level 11, that also means 5, because we don't do rounding. Full rest is something that takes a full 8 hours, but the benefit here, once per day, is that you can recover all missing health, mana, and upon a successful full rest, you recover all your vitality dice. So those are the 3 types of rest, pretty straightforward. And then we have downtime activities, which are something that maybe we'll add a bit more depth to in this section in the future. But for now, it's really just pointing out that downtime activities can be performed over the course of an hour or more. And these are going to be ways for players to just spend an hour or 2, 3 to do roleplay in game, perform research and investigation. So let's say I go to a library. If it turns out we're not going to play out going to a library, we can just say this is a downtime activity where the characters split up and perform different tasks. You could also do trade and bartering. So say like shopping for new gear, upgrades, using profession features for things like crafting or whatever they may provide. Or if say, let's say the party is taking 8 hours of downtime activity and a player only has 4 hours of things that they want to do, well, they could also perform a rest just to eat up the rest of the time available. So really flexible. These are just some examples, but adventuring, pretty straightforward. concept in TTRPGs. Arcana is a concept. It's a mechanic that can be really tuned and flavored as needed, but it represents all the different kind of manifestations and interpretations of mythical things that could occur. Things that maybe we peasants on this simple planet can't comprehend, but things like magic, superpowers, psychic powers, things that are maybe more for advanced technology, and in cases of, say, sci-fi campaigns, other mysterious things, whatever they may be, is what Arcana represents. So it's really a catch-all for anything magical, mythical, whatever, mystical, so on and so forth. So again, we highlight our arcane affinities. Characters all have one innate affinity, but the innate affinities are arcane affinities. So once again, looks like this one has heat properly, but those are the same 6 from earlier. Oh, and then I forgot, we do cover innate affinity here again, just to have it. Resist reaction, right? We cover that again. It was touched on in combat. Mana points and invokes. Invokes are really just a concept for casting. This could be activating, whatever it may be. But invoking is the ability to use arcane features at a desired rank rather than at full cast. So, or full, at their highest rank level, if you want to think of it that way. So as we talked about during features, character features, say, have 9 ranks. So if I had a character feature at rank 9 and I used it, it activates at rank 9. Arcane features are different because arcane features cost mana points. So the invoke allows us to choose, hey, if I have a arcane feature at rank 9, maybe rank 9 is a bit overkill. So I'm going to instead say, hey, I want to use it at rank 3, right? And spend 3 mana instead, because MP cost, the mana point cost, is equal to the rank of an arcane feature that I use. So if I use it at rank 3, I spend 3 mana. If I use it at rank 6, I spend 6 mana, so on and so forth. Inventory and equipment. We're not going to get too deep into this just because I do want to spend a little bit of time looking at the inventory section, the inventory tab. But this inventory section really just describes what are the different types of equipment and items, right? So we highlight equipments, which are going to be covered in the equipment tab. We cover what consumables are. We cover the attributes of consumables, generally curative or toxic, which are positive and negative respectively. Materials, which are things used generally for crafting or with toolkits. Toolkits themselves, which contain the tools and components to do things. And we have shelter, which is a type of toolkit, but separated into its own category for rest purposes, if needed. And then we also have traps, which are a type of toolkit that is usually there to inflict an effect or inflict damage, right? Slots and capacity. So capacity is given by equipping backpacks and bags. So we do have 2 classes of containers. Backpacks provide capacity for items and equipment. So we have light, medium, heavy. And then we have pouches, satchels, and holsters, which provide capacity for items, and in the holsters case for equipment. So these are really just the ability to quickly stash items as a reaction versus backpacks, which would require an action. So this gives some flexibility to games where, say, let's say you have a, I don't even know, an alchemist that has a bunch of potions that you want to have on like a bandolier, then you could say use a pouch or a satchel to quickly pull them out as reactions rather than having to shuffle through a backpack that's being worn that takes longer to pull out, say, maybe a health potion, for example. So it's a very simple mechanic. The capacity numbers are obviously flexible for dungeon managers to make adjustments to, but we have tried to create a very decent baseline to represent the concepts of slots and weights. Crafting items. A brief section here doesn't really get into too much detail since we're saving that for profession features and their descriptions, which do still need a little bit of work in the alpha phase here. But we do touch on crafting and the ability to craft items by spending material and using a toolkit with the profession feature in order to do crafting. Excuse me. Equipment really just highlights the different types of melee and ranged weapons, kind of the formulas or the concepts around how we're sizing them. Throwing reach, which decides how far a weapon could be thrown using body, right? We talked about the throwing attribute, which allows you to add the skill to the throwing reach as well to allow you to throw it much farther. We also have ranged weapons and their basic kind of classifications based on their size, as well as how the range for ranged weapons are determined. So we do have firearms in the game, and they have a bit of a further reach, but ranged weapons will have a range based on the die damage, right? So larger damage typically allows it to fly farther is the idea here. Armors and shields really just get covered again. This is really not too different from the players tab that we were looking at earlier. And then we have a section here for the attributes in a single list. So there are other attributes. I'm wondering if I should include them here. I probably should. Yeah, we'll probably add that at some point. Equipment quality. So equipment quality doesn't get covered until here because at level 1, it's going to play probably a very negligible, if even make an appearance. But there are quality tiers to the system for equipment. So weapons could potentially be damaged to be given a -1 modifier. We don't really cover damaged in the rules at all because we haven't decided if we want to introduce it through, say, I roll a natural 1 or make it just like an optional roll. But the quality tier is described here. Common equipment, which is what characters will primarily gain, has no modifier. Reinforced is the kind of first tier of an upgrade, which grants the +1. Mastercraft is a +2, Masterpiece +3, and artifacts are +5. So we talk about equipment quality here just very briefly, just to showcase that they exist, but the dungeon manager will more likely decide how these are granted or given. Upgrades. Upgrades do describe also how equipment can be improved. So whether it's done through professions that are available to make improvements, or if it's done through barter and trade, or going to, say, like a blacksmith, for example. We do talk about the upgrades and what it takes to get reinforced, what it provides for armors and shields, right? So weapons, melee ranged weapons gain attack and damage, armors and shields gain armor score. Equipment with improved quality also gain additional attributes. So we'll cover this actually soon. We're getting towards the bottom here, so we're going to move on to features and inventory. But part of gear progression, we're going to have the ability to choose a number of attributes that weapons will have. So stay tuned for equipment attributes, because that's, I think, a cool aspect of what we're building here. Reinforced. So again, that +1 tier also gives players the ability to combine gear with an arcane catalyst. So if I want to infuse, say, my weapon with a catalyst or armor, it'll give it the catalyst attribute. So you can use arcane features by channeling through your weapon or an armor. But also, if it allows characters to use their innate affinity as the damage. So basically channeling your innate affinity into your gear and giving it some flavor, some what's the word? Some pizzazz, whatever it may be, right? So this is a feature, or not a feature, but this is a bonus to equipment that characters can take advantage of. All right, this section, we're not going to actually cover Dungeon Manager's Manual just because it's a bit of a long section, much like inventory and equipment. And this is something that really Dungeon Managers could probably review. And we'll talk a little bit towards the end what our plans for our next updates are going to be. But the Dungeon Manager's Manual is something that we've added at the end of, well, actually, in preparation for Alpha 2, which really just provides some additional rules for dungeon managers to review to help them run games, run sessions. So the first one is talking about difficulty scores, right? So this is how do we resolve what's in the game. So difficulty scores, right? A challenge has to be greater than a difficulty score to be successful. And then we define difficulty scores from challenges. So challenges saying like, hey, if I attack, I roll a challenge. And if I defend, my defend is contesting that challenge. So challenge difficulty scores, passive difficulty scores. So passive scores, right, are, hey, nobody's done anything yet. But I am targeting a character. So this would be like the first attack in a turn or a round, right? There's nobody else has gone yet. I want to attack a character. What am I rolling against? This is where all characters will have a passive stat. So in the case of combat, your character would roll against the target's passive speed, as we covered earlier. And if there isn't even a character that we're targeting and we just need to be able to determine a score, we do have a simple way of calculating difficulty score. It's a very simple 6 rating system, and we multiply that number by 5. So a very easy challenge, which is going to be a rating of 1, will be multiplied by 5. So this is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 is the short answer here. So maybe just for simplicity's sake, I should add like the totals here, but right, very easy. Almost anybody should be able to accomplish this. You'd have to get really unlucky on your D20 and roll really poorly on your stat to fail a very easy challenge. Whereas a typical character, let's say if it's a D20 and a D12, right? If you roll at least average, that's a 22, which means that most characters should have reasonable success overcoming average or difficult challenges, whereas hard and very hard challenges, being at 25 and 30, would likely require a feature to be used, or maybe even a bit of cooperation between 2 characters to accomplish, or at least that is the idea. In practice, we'll continue to see how that plays out. We have a section here for simple stats for non-player characters. So this is really just a section that covers for dungeon managers how to quickly decide if how an NPC or how a trash mob are affected or behave. We have milestone leveling, which is an objective-based milestone, or where did I put it? Or just optionally granted by the dungeon manager based on story, plot, whatever event, right? Completion of a session. But in short, objectives, if we're going to be looking at objectives, is based on the level of the characters. At level 1, we're going to require 1 objective. At level 9, we require 9 objectives in order to reach level 10. It's a very simple, I think, linear way of granting, we'll call it experience, to characters in the form of resolving tasks. And resolving is an interesting word in this case, because resolving doesn't necessarily have to mean direct success, right? It could be, you know, it wasn't the ideal way to finish the task, but it was a way to finish the task, right? So it's really up to the dungeon manager to decide what constitutes as an objective, but we do have a mechanic here for that as well. Cost of equipment, we're not going to cover costs. This is pretty cut and dry. Cost of items, there's some formulas on how we did our calculations and how we're defining costs. Same thing goes with upgrades and cost for upgrades. And then some optional rules such as, you know, daily needs. So this is like survival rules, as well as one we call size matters, which is another way for dungeon managers to kind of more quickly identify and decide how to affect the pace of a game. So if a character's stats are larger than an opponent's stats, maybe the larger stat wins out in certain circumstances. So again, Dungeon Manager's Manual. Oh, that is a tongue twister for me. But the Dungeon Manager's Manual hopefully will provide, again, the tools and some extra resources for those looking to run the game and understand some aspects of how to run a game. The final section here, we're not going to really talk too much about, but there's a link to our Discord. You'll find this also in the description. And then we also have a section for our donation. So if you want to support this project, if you want to see it grow, if you want to see it evolve, we appreciate your support. And currently we have tiers for $1, $5, and $10 USD, which grant currently a Discord role in the future, depending on funding, depending on what we can bring to the table, the companion app is one thing that we've worked on just to bring the system more to life. But if you'd like to support us, we'd like to introduce other ways to enjoy the system, which we will probably find some time later to talk about when we go to maybe our Ko-fi page, just to take a quick look at it. All right, let's switch gears to features very briefly. Features are separated into their types. So we have racial, archetype, character, arcane, and profession. We also have some filters here. So you can go to filter what type it is, action, reaction, or in the rare case, a special. Is it an enhancement, utility, offensive, defense, sensory, or movement type? Action or reaction, what stat is being used. So if it's like, hey, I'm specifically looking for something to use my body stat with, right? You can filter for that. So there are filters off on the side here. I wish there was a way to make it so it always showed up at the top, but I have not been able to figure out how to get that to show up that way. But yeah, so racial features, right, are going to have and I am pretty satisfied with how this is presented here. Let's go ahead and realign these, right? So we have racial features. There's 40 of them. We're not going to go through all of them, but let's pick one as an example. Let's go with shape-shifting. So there's a bunch of them. Feel free to, again, review this on your own. The link is in the description. Where is it? Oh wait, no, it's not a racial feature. It's under archetype. What's a good racial one to cover? You know, let's just use additional arms. Yeah, we'll just use the top one here. So the economy will say, is it an action? Is it a reaction? The type will tell you what type it is. The definitions for these are in the terms tab. We have requirements. This one's probably important to look at. Most of them will allow for beast and monster or the other races. What stat is affected by this feature, a brief description, and the rank. So it might be helpful, right, to say, go into racial features and choose, you know what, I don't have filters for racial requirements. We're gonna have to add that. Yeah, that's something I missed. But then archetype features. So archetype features, again, these also have 1 point or 1 rank, right? So archetypes are gonna be specific features, character features that provide a very unique ability for characters to have. So one that a lot of our playtesters enjoyed was shape-shifting. So I'm not gonna really describe it all, but again, what's the economy? What's the type? What stats are affected or used, and the description and the max rank at the bottom. So this is, again, a nice little simple list that you can kind of go in, right? There's some arrow keys here. If you're on mobile, you'll actually see these kind of one frame at a time, but you can swipe left and right and view them quickly as well. Arcane features are all in here. Profession features are all in here. And profession features also have a downtime activity description, which kind of highlights what is used for the crafting side of things. We will, in Alpha 2, be making another pass at features. So as much as we've expanded from Alpha 1 how many features we have, I think originally we had 60 or 80 features. Now we're at 190. So the features list has grown quite a bit, but we will be looking to redefine a few of them and maybe balance them out once we start pushing into more of a beta phase of the system. So review the features, join our Discord, tell us what you think. If you're concerned about any of these descriptions, if you're confused about any of them, maybe even if you have suggestions for features that we overlooked, that would be good for defining a racial type, or a archetype, or a profession that should be in the game. One thing that we'll talk about, though, before we leave the features tab is the oh, it's under special. Right. Actually, I think I also have a type one, right? Racial size. Yeah. So racial size are exclusive one per character, right? The standard racial size or character size is medium. But if a player wants to change their size, there is a thing to keep in mind here, which is you improve a stat and you reduce a stat, in addition to affecting the token size if you're huge or large. So this is just something to keep in mind, that if you want to change your size, you can, but there is going to be a trade-off with the stats that you'll have to make. So that's the one little note when it comes to features. Otherwise, everything else should be pretty much as described in our features tab. Inventory. Inventory is really just a big list at the moment. We have weapons at the top. We have somewhere down here, we have armor, which is really just the 3 types. We have backpacks, the 3 types. We have bags, 3 types. We have descriptions for materials as items, consumables, right? Just kind of the standard materials or standard items that we have within the game thus far. Shelter, toolkits, and traps. So what I would probably recommend, right, is you come in here and you say, hey, I'm looking for my weapons, and maybe an attribute of, let's say I'm looking for ranged attribute, right? So you can see here a list of what equipment are available with their type, description, attributes, damage type. So there's 3 physical types of damage: piercing, blunt, and slashing, or pierce, blunt, slash. The reach, which is going to be how many spaces the weapon can reach. So as ranged weapons are, right, we are taking a value based on the damage in the rules. Upgrade attributes. So this is what I was talking about when it comes to equipment upgrades. So each equipment in DungeonCORE20 has its base attribute at the bottom, right? Most small weapons have light, medium weapons are versatile, heavy weapons are heavy versatile, and then we have throwing, reach, ranged, firearm, and shield weapons, right? These are all different weapon attributes, but each weapon also has upgrade attributes. And I believe we've added 3 of them, to each weapon type. So for players looking to see a little bit of gear progression, you can look forward to upgrading gear and choosing which attributes that they gain, whether they be from going in and getting them improved, or going to a, say, shop and buying one that is already upgraded, right? So there are a lot of new attributes that we've introduced. This is, I think, new to Alpha 2. We didn't really have these in Alpha 1, in our pre-alpha as well. So a little mechanic here for improving equipment and giving them attributes to make them a bit more personalized based on what the character is looking for out of their equipment. So I'm pretty happy with the direction that we're going for these upgrade attributes. Let's see here. Yeah, again, the link is in the description where you can access the app. Feel free to review the different types of items and equipment that we have in the game. And as far as miscellaneous items go, things like, hey, I want to have a bag of rocks. I mean, you could have a bag of rocks. I suppose stone is a material in the game, but we've only really defined kind of the framework for the system when it comes to items and equipment. So if there are, say, miscellaneous kind of goods and items, or maybe things unique to a specific game, obviously those items may be added as well. We just didn't want to overwhelm our app here with frankly, a ridiculous list of what players could do. We just wanted to provide the framework for the types of items and the basic items that are used to play. All right. Last up, the terms tab here. Pretty simple. These are split up into kind of terminology sections. We have different categories for stats, actions, reactions, movement, races, arcana, features, equipment, items, and conditions, and terrains. Terrain doesn't really get talked about because it's really just here to set some categories for terrain. But otherwise, the terms tab are a place where you can go and search for, hey, I saw a word in the rules. I don't know what that means. I want to look it up, right? If there is a term that is missing from our terms page here, do let us know on our Discord and we'll make sure to get that added. But let's say, hey, what the heck does guard mean? Well, here it is. Perform a body challenge against an attack to double armor score against damage that would be received. Straightforward. Nice. What's another one? Let's can I push a character, right? Like, we didn't talk about this in combat, but can I push a character? Oh, there it is. Shove push. Perform a body challenge against target's passive speed and choose an effect. Deal damage, inflict prone, push them. There we go. So I hope I've covered a good range of what could be searched or what players might be confused about or what terms come up in the rules. In many cases, if a word is capitalized, that means we have a word that is searchable. So speed, I guess there's a bunch that include speed in the description. So speed is a bit of a difficult one. Let's see here. I should probably remove what's being flagged for that. But here's speed right here. Here's move speed. What else? What else could we look up? Heavy. What did heavy mean? Okay, so disadvantage is skill and speed challenges, body stats below 10. Okay, so it's actually specific to body and skill. It doubles equipment weight, which is already included. So again, pretty basic glossary, but if you guys have recommendations on what you'd like to see here, if anything's missing, let me know. Yeah, I don't know what else here. I think that's about it. There is an about section here. I wish it would actually just show more. I guess I am zoomed in. But here we can take a look at, here's our Discord link. Oh, we don't have the option to select it. Oh, interesting. I believe, yeah, so the more information button here, actually, I can't highlight this. Oh, that's a shame. I'm gonna have to figure out if there's a way to add hyperlinks, but click on more information. This will take you to our Discord, which let's go ahead and pull that up very quickly here as we get close to wrapping up today. Discord. Oh, wrong. No, that's not the right one. Okay, I'm going to do it through the browser. Here we go. So our Discord is super simple. Again, there used to be our rules and features and inventory. They all used to be here. So we've cleaned it up pretty greatly. We have here just our about page, which goes over our community guidelines, which I think these might be our old ones. So we'll have to update that. You will need to select the green check mark to gain access. But we have a Traveler's Tavern here for just general commentary. It's still a baby community, just getting started. So join it. Let us know what you think of the system. I'm going to be looking to run more playtests in Alpha 2, probably more frequently and advertise through the Discord. So you'll be able to find some of those here. A lot of news and updates will probably be posted here as well. I'm not super big on social media, but I'll do my best to keep track of it. Here we have our DungeonCore forums, which I need to now make a post releasing the app, because the last one here is our coming soon, which was earlier this month or past month. But yeah, we have a forums here where you can post discussion, questions, suggestions, videos, and clips. We have a TTRPG and games section where you can just talk about systems in general. We have a memes and art channel, which we haven't really done much with. And then we have a looking for group where I will be advertising when I'm looking for a group. And anyone else who maybe is looking to find a group for other players to join DungeonCORE20. There are some other channels that we will be looking to add. I just haven't prioritized the Discord since the focus has been on the app itself and also our Foundry module, right? Because what's a system if it's difficult to play, right? So we want to make it as easy to find the rules, learn the rules, and then play the game. And we're going to be using Foundry to try to perform that. Now, so as far as additional sections here in the Discord, we are eventually going to look to add a section for characters for players to share characters, a place where players or dungeon managers can specifically host or sponsor or advertise their sessions that they're running. So rather than just a looking for group, we'll have like a looking for players forum that you can search that people who are actually running games could post in. And then also I'm thinking about a section for players and dungeon managers to share maybe like posts on a location or a creature or an NPC, right? A way to post things that can be kind of more plug and play based on what the category is. So I think those would be some fun things to add to the Discord, but it's, again, a baby community. We don't really have how many people we have here? I guess 28 would be the number. 20, 25, 28, something like that. So it's not tiny, but it's not really large yet. So I look forward to seeing you guys there. Link again in the description. Hop on, click the button, accept the community guidelines, and then let us know what you think. Try out the system, get some friends together, and play it out. Let's see here. Last thing that we'll probably touch on today will be our Ko-fi, whatever it's pronounced. DungeonCORE20. Again, the link for this is also in the description. This is our crowdfunding page. It's very similar to Patreon. You can use PayPal, Stripe, whatever suits your fancy if you decide to support us. But we are a crowdfunded effort. I'm not sure if I'm going to try to do like a Kickstarter or anything for this. Probably not yet, at least. If I do it, maybe if the community would like to see it or support it, or maybe if we're at a certain goal where we can really start thinking more realistically about, say, maybe physical goods. Right now, most of what we're working on is digital because I am still working on this more as a one-man team. But yeah, we have a funding goal of 4K, which if we reach that, basically it gives us unlimited potential to grow and continue to make the system great for players, improve kind of many aspects of the game. Yeah, okay, so I did also add some future goals here, right? So we're working on this anyways, but getting funding will help us accelerate what we're able to do with the system and how we're able to grow it. So if you like to see it grow, if you like what you're hearing, if you like kind of the mechanics that we're introducing and the framework that we're providing, consider supporting us. We have monthly goals or monthly tiers for Toss a Coin, which is just $1 a month, feed the dungeon and get the Traveler role. We have Dungeoneer, $5 a month, enter the dungeon, get the Dungeoneer role, and Challenger, which I think we're formally going to go with Challenger for this tier, but challenge the dungeon, right? Put us, give us your challenge here, $10 a month to make sure that this project grows. But yeah, in the future, we do have, again, the companion app, but I am interested in a proper web application, right? What we've built is something that I've built kind of by myself with my limited knowledge and capabilities, but we would like to make a proper website that has the rules, the features, with all the bells and whistles of, you know, filtering and making it even easier to search and look up, but also a way to create a character, and if funding allows, even maybe a web-based way to play the game rather than requiring an app or something, for example, right? Or maybe through an app, playing it through an app. So, you know, if you're at the table with a group of friends, or if you're in the living room and you're like, you guys want to play some DungeonCORE20? You have a quick and easy way to play it, right? At least that's the vision that I'd like to see made real here. Additional funding also will help with localization efforts. This is something that I would love to do, especially, you know, Spanish, European languages, and if there's interest, even maybe like Chinese or I don't know what other languages would be popular, but you guys let me know in the Discord or in the comments what localization you'd like to see. I've already had someone let me know that Spanish would be a good one, and I agree. I know there's a lot of Spanish-speaking folks out there who enjoy TTRPGs, so that will probably be at the top of the list. But again, this requires some help from folks that understand languages more than Google, right? As much as Google Translate could help. Updating the companion app right now, we are again delivering it through a bit of a third party, as in AppSheet, but we would like to create a proper companion app that is official, even more official than what we've put out there, and maybe even combine that with the web application, right? So we have a note about that. And I would love some basic, just physical goods, right? I know not everybody cares for just the all digital model, so I don't know what kind of like a rule book would be appropriate, but maybe rather than going the rule book route, maybe we would look to provide, you know, tools that people can use to play their games, tools that people can use to run their games with the branding that we have, and maybe even just some simple goods that hobbyists would enjoy, like mugs. You know, who knows? But let me know what you guys might like to see, and if funding supports it, we look to grow into it. So that is our Ko-fi, coffee, whatever it's called. Do check it out. Again, I'm not great with social media, so unless funding allows me to, you know, maybe hire a social media manager or something, it's going to be pretty much limited to important news and updates. We'll see what happens, but that is how you can support us. Oh, what happened there? Cool. So I know this video went a couple hours long, and there was a lot to cover in the various sections, and there's likely some changes that will still need to be performed. But keep in mind, right, we are in alpha. I am coining it as alpha 2. This is probably the last stage of alpha that I'm going to approve for myself. Pre-alpha, we'll actually just kind of take a moment to chit chat here for a second here, now that we're at the end. But yeah, pre-alpha was really just, hey, is there a concept here with what I'd like to build towards? And it sounds like through initial playtests that there was positive feedback. There was a flavor of TTRPGs here that other systems didn't provide. So, you know, we started to build it. And Alpha 1 was really building out the basics of the rules, introducing just the basic concept of how to build a character, having a very, very minimal list of features. And shoot, did we even have inventory in Alpha 1? I don't think we did. I think I had like a basic list of weapons or weapon types, and maybe that was about it. And then terms also did not exist. So we've done a lot of work here to build out this app. I hope you guys enjoy it. Do check it out. Let me know what you think, either in the comments or in the Discord. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it came out so far. Obviously, again, I'm looking at it through a browser, but you guys can check it out through mobile devices if you download the AppSheet application. We do have our own app file. I haven't decided if I'm gonna put that out yet and publish that on the stores themselves. Probably we're probably gonna save that for when we rebrand. So DungeonCORE20, for those who haven't heard, is a project name. I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue it just because of the DC and Dungeon Core being a novel series, and DC20 being a system that another individual is working on. So DungeonCORE20 will likely be rebranded at the end of Alpha 2, moving into Beta. And then when we do that, maybe when we push to publish an app on the Google Store and the Apple Store, right? Yeah, I don't really have too much else for you guys. I hope you enjoy the system. Try it out. Get a couple people together. Really the idea for the system. And I think for this, let me actually switch back over to actual Discord. So this is my Discord. Where are you? Here we go. So if I zoom in here, this is a bit of a sneak peek for those who have not seen Dungeon Core before. Oh, helps if I push the right button. Let's see here. How did I zoom in? Was it Shift, Control? There it is. I was wondering where that zoom in button was. And get rid of the borders here. There we go. That'll do. So yeah, so coming back into our Discord server here, obviously you guys are seeing a bit more but under the alpha rules. So this is actually what we used to have. So behind the scenes, this is alpha, pre-alpha / alpha 1. We were originally going to introduce through Discord the ways to create a character and the information about the system and you know, terms. Oh, this is something that we need to update and push out again. So on the Discord, we'll probably work on an updated version of this in the near future here, but a reference sheet for players, right? What are the actions and reactions and conditions, and providing that in an easy reference sheet. But yeah, terms used to be just affinities. So yeah, we didn't even have terms. And we had this library concept, which is where we had, say, like our equipment, which, yeah, this wasn't working out because Discord auto closes posts, and sometimes that unknown, it's a little better now. See, it actually updated. But before, man, it would just be stuck on unknown, and it was a bit of a headache. So I still think there's a bit of charm to delivering the system this way. But yeah, as you can see, the number of features that we used to have is, yeah, see, this wasn't gonna cut it. So we decided to move away from Discord and create the app. I say we, it's just it's a habit from my working days. But yeah, we're moving over to the app rather than having everything through Discord, because there was no back button, so you couldn't easily go back and forth between like what you were looking at and what you're looking for. So unfortunately, not the best. Didn't work out as an ideal way of delivering this information. So we've also made a lot of changes just with the rules in general. The spirit of the game is still intact, but there were a lot of, I suppose, fine tuning that was done with how the design would have to be built in order to support the kind of framework of features that we're going for. And I think equipment, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure we didn't even have attributes. Okay, we had base attributes, but nothing when it comes to like upgrades or anything like that. So yeah, but DungeonCore, right? One of the early ideas, where did I put it? Character sharing. One of the early ideas for creating DungeonCore was also the idea of creating a character card, much like this, being able to create a card with your stats, with your basic information, name, level, right? And go to a convention or a tabletop hobby store or wherever and pull out the card, and just, you could either start playing or you could use the app with the list of, you know, features that you have and play that way, right? Super simple, super clean. Maybe this will be like some kind of a merch idea that we could have, where we create like maybe a card sleeve where you can put your favorite photo or image into and, you know, write on it, because it's maybe a plastic sleeve, right? So I would like to make these kind of character cards rather than character sheets. And maybe in the future we'll even make like a deck. So for items and features, we might have a deck that players can purchase. So there's a bunch of ideas on how we might want to grow the system here and provide, you know, tools, materials, goods for you guys to enjoy the system. But yeah, character cards, we are actually going to move forward with this. I just don't have the updated images ready yet from the artist. We do have an artist that we are trying to work with here to get this done. So look forward to our future update, which will likely include official art for character cards that you guys can create. I also am in talks with a developer to create a web app to help build this card. So once we have the finished assets, we're going to have our developer try to create a system where you can go and upload a photo, size it to the I guess art asset, and then print out or export your own little DungeonCORE20 character card. So look forward to that, is something that we're working on behind the scenes. The other one, flashbang warning if you're in the dark, but let me open up Foundry very quickly too. Here we go. So in Foundry, we are also working on a very simple way of enjoying the system. We are using a system builder module, or a system builder system. I don't remember what Foundry calls them, but this is something that will have to be updated and we'll have to continue to work on. But the basics are pretty simple, right? Let's actually look at creating a character here, right? So we have our stats. I might actually remove the actions column here and just keep it stats, and we have features, we have inventory. But the idea here is, hey, I can come in here and say, what is it? 3 improvements at level 1, right? So let's say, what kind of character do I want to make? Let's choose our race first. Let's say we're going to make a mixed race. We'll make like a, what's a character the internet loves? Trying to think, like, man, on the spot, I'm drawing a blank. You know what? Let's do a half elf. We'll create a half elf who's a medium. And we're going to give this half elf, we want him to be good at, let's say, archery and maybe being stealthy. So we definitely want to bump up skill and speed. Do I want to bump up skill again? Or do I want to put I'm going to put a point in mind, actually. Okay, so our health points, it actually calculates the minimum based on our stats. You actually see it updated because I increased the mind. So mind automatically got increased. So health points is body plus vitality, which is a 12. It's kind of on the low side, but it'll do for level 1. And then with our mana point, it's going to be, did I add a hotkey here or a short? No, I didn't. Half of 8 is 4, half of 6 is 3. So 4 plus 3 is 7. So this will be 7. Again, the minimum at level 1's already been calculated. And affinity, do I want to go with force? I got to update that to heat. Let's go with spirit. Spirit probably makes sense for your typical elf, half elf ranger type character. All right. And I just remembered I don't have all the features in the system just yet, but we are building out a compendium where you'll be able to find the different features in the game. So still a work in progress, but you know, with your support and with a little bit of time, we're going to keep building this out. So let's see here. Half race gets 4 features. Let's go with instinct, agility, intelligence, nocturnal sight, and I'm just kind of choosing ones that already exist on this list, and we'll take a look at the details here in a second. Agility, let's go with the nocturnal. I already added. You know what, if we make it like a wood elf that has regeneration, why not? Actually, I might not be able to take that as an elf. Let's see here. So instinct, instinct was beast and monster only. All right, so let's remove that one. And I think regeneration actually might, regeneration was for all of them. Okay, cool. This one didn't have requirements. Either that or I forgot to add them. Okay, right. So natural agility, description here, making any speed, gain an additional speed to the challenge. Okay, yeah, that one's fine. Nocturnal, as a reaction, visibility conditions dim dark, gain normal vision until conditions change, and then regen after receiving damage, spend vitality, restore health points. Cool. Regeneration's a bit of a trade-off because again, I'm spending vitality dice. But you know what? Let's also go with what else? Let's go with swimming. Like this guy could totally swim. Come on now. As a reaction, spend move speed for swimming without needing a body challenge in normal or rough terrain. Cool. Right? Okay, and then swimming also has upkeep. So as long as I keep my upkeep, I can swim in normal and rough terrain without the dungeon man trying to tell me I can't. Cool. So those are going to be my 4 racial features as a half elf. I should also add maybe a couple of text areas here so you guys can tell what type of a race you chose if it's mixed, right? Because these other ones are named, but mixed doesn't really say. All right. So that is our racial feature. let's also then look at archetype feature. What did I have here? You know what? We have a, okay, so we got like a wood elf dude that can swim quick, can see relatively okay in the dark. Definitely a quick boy. Let's go with, you know what? Mutation's a fun one. Gain 1 racial feature when you acquire this. Anytime you spend 1 or more vitality to gain dice or death timer, temporary, you may temporarily lose the racial feature and double the results. Okay. As a reaction during a rest, you may gain or replace feature from a mutation with another feature. So this basically just gains a racial feature. So let's actually do that. I'll have an archetype where I have a mutation, which is giving me, this is where I'll take that instinct one I wanted earlier. So instinct is going to give us, as a reaction against a target with concealed or invisible, gain advantage to search or defend challenges. So yeah, I'm a bit more resilient to the effects of someone who's trying to do something sneaky. Yeah, that seems pretty cool to me. I like that. And character features, we get 4 of them as well. So for this one, we're definitely going to take acrobatic. I have the advantage of kind of knowing what a lot of these already do. Elusive. And let's also take Sixth Sense and Unarmed Brawler. Man, I'm making myself a John Bourne or Jason Bourne. So acrobatics lets me, when I'm performing physical activity, add my rank to a challenge. Oh, you know what? Actually, I could do that. Let's, instead of, I don't really want an Unarmed Brawler. Elusive lets me, when I'm making a dodge or conceal, add rank. So these are just, again, kind of giving me bonuses to, oh, this should be rank 1. Right? These are really just giving me extra abilities to augment what my character is able to do. Right? That's really what's big about these. So, did I add a profession by chance? You know what? Let's add survivalist. That's actually good. Yeah, I like that. Right, so we have elusive, acrobatic, Sixth Sense, which is as a reaction when targeted by an attack up to rank spaces from me. So this one actually doesn't have a whole lot of benefit at this early level. So tell you what, actually, I'm going to bump this up to rank 2, and I'm going to get rid of acrobatic. This is kind of maybe the setup I want. And then survivalist has add rank to mind challenges when performing survival. At rank 6, I can add skill. At rank 9, I can gain advantage using a survival kit. Okay. And then survival kit lets me create some food, create shelter, create stone weapons and traps. Which again, a lot of the profession features in particular, this was something that we finally decided on how we wanted to proceed with at the end of Alpha 1. So there's still a lot of updates that we're likely going to be making. And then also this Foundry module, if we're going to call it that, is also super basic. This is something kind of I'm making using a tool with my limited coding experience for these types of web apps. In the future, if funding allows, I would love to get someone proper to make it better, but this is what we're getting until that happens. Okay, so yeah, so stats, right? Stats are super easy. You just set up your dice, choose an affinity, set up your basic kind of starting stats. Also, yeah, move speed and reactions should be higher because I have a D8 in speed. And then features, pretty simple, right? You go through the list of what is available, add it to your character. I probably will change some of these tabs here to be a bit different. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about the alignment because it's per category, not as a complete list. I wish I could just manually define the size, the minimum size for each of them to get them to line up better, but it is what it is. Also, arcane features should be hidden until I actually put something in there. Inventory is the last tab here, which is really just, again, a simple way to have items. So actually, yeah, let's do that real quick. I'm gonna have a dagger and light armor. So we got my armor and weapon. Maybe a bow would have been better, but I don't have a bow in here, so deal with it. And then consumables, really, again, consumables don't really matter at the moment. It really depends on the game that we're playing, or not consumables, items, right? So as during character creation, items and consumables, you might not have, but with the starting currency, oh, that's a good point. Starting currency, what was it? It was 4d6, right? Which is a 17, so I get 170 currency, which then I can use to buy, say, a light backpack, which, did I even add the cost here yet? No. So again, a lot of work in progress with the Foundry side of things, but hopefully this will be a good way for you guys to try out the system and play it. So we have, you know, some rules here where we can paste the definition, roll for damage. Again, I wish I could make it prettier. It's outside, it's beyond me. So for now, you guys get this very simple way to play using the system. So once this is done, we will likely post the materials to import to use this on our Discord. And if someone could help me figure out how to make it a proper repository on Git for something like this, you know, reach out. Let me know what you guys think. But anyways, that's the Foundry side of things. So with that, let's go ahead and I think we're going to be wrapping up this little update. So we do have a official YouTube channel, which I have not posted anything on yet. And the reason for that is we're still developing. So right now, this has been my kind of way to share the changes and updates based on, in a more comfortable way, being the little Dregn Durant VTuber that I'm playing out here. But in the near future, now that we've kind of put the update out there, I will be looking in the next month, 2 months. I have, gosh, how many projects do I have? I have two other projects that I need to kind of get done first, now that I've made the updates for the companion app and pushed it out, or I'm about to, on the Discord at least. But yeah, I have something I need to get done this next couple of weeks. We have the holidays coming up, but I will be looking to create more specific guides for each section of the rules, right? So I know going through it in its like entirety tonight was a lot, but I did also identify a few nuances that I have to make some updates for. But once those are kind of tweaked out, fixed up, polished and improved, whatever it may be, we'll go ahead and make some shorter videos that specifically talk about creating a character, specifically talk about, you know, combat actions and reactions, and how, and providing some examples, right? Or, hey, target attacks you, what can I do? This is the abilities that you have. But I think in order to make those videos, I need to finish making my progress on the Foundry side, because that will represent kind of a physical, not a physical, a visual that I can use to make those shorter guides and videos and whatnot. So one little thing at a time. But if you found this channel, this is kind of my sandbox to ramble and play games and rarely stream, but we're working on the system. So if you enjoyed it, check out our Ko-fi, support us. Any bit of funding helps. And I look forward to building the system and hearing what you all think about it, because I, for one, have grown tired of our big brother TTRPG out there getting a little too touchy-feely with the monetizing goals that they have for players who maybe can't afford or don't want to have everything centralized and normalized. So I think one of the special things about the TTRPG hobby is the ability for a bunch of creative folks out there to be able to create very fun, unique characters, some of which that I can't even fathom. And for those that enjoy building kind of worlds and settings for players to explore and challenges for them to face. And I hope more systems support what the game master of a system is looking to be able to accomplish as well as providing players a more hands-on way where they can get involved and feel like their character is theirs and not just built through a bunch of puzzle pieces, as much as our system maybe parallels that to a certain degree. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. We're going to call it here. Look forward to the Foundry module, I guess, alpha that we'll put out. Hopefully, I'm hoping, don't keep me to it, but hoping by the end of the year, and some videos that could be pushed out in around that time as well. Once the, again, visuals to kind of showcase it are available. So with that, this was DungeonCore20, soon to be rebranded, but we'll save that for after our alpha phase of development. But this is alpha 2. We're here. We've grown the system. We have a pretty good idea what kind of mechanics are going to go into the system, and alpha 2 is going to be about continuing to share it with you all and getting feedback and making those improvements. And once we're ready for moving into more of a beta type of a phase, we're going to be looking at really making it a bit more playable, a bit more accessible, and hopefully we have the funding to support that. So thank you guys. All right. Have a great evening. Have a great day wherever you may be. And I'll see you on the Discord. Join us. Catch you later. Push the button. Bye.